What if the reason you're exhausted, overwhelmed, and still not where you want to be isn't because you're lazy, but because you're trying too hard in the wrong direction? Most people have been sold a dangerous lie. A lie that says productivity means longer hours, fuller calendars, and constant pressure. That if you slow down, you fall behind. That if you rest, you're weak. And so they grind relentlessly, mistaking motion for progress, busyness for impact, and burnout for ambition. Yet despite all that effort, the results rarely match the sacrifice. In this audiobook, the Anti-Hustle Playbook, we dismantle that lie completely. You'll learn why doing more is often the fastest way to achieve less, and how the highest performers in the world quietly operate by a different set of rules. Rules built on ruthless prioritization, strategic simplification, and deliberate rest. Not chaos, not constant urgency, and not endless hustle. This is not about being lazy. This is about being precise. You'll discover how to strip away low-impact effort, protect your energy like a scarce asset, and focus only on actions that truly move the needle. Not someday, not theoretically, but in a way that immediately changes how you work, think, and measure success. If you've ever felt busy but unfulfilled, productive but stuck, ambitious yet drained, this audiobook is your reset. Because the future doesn't belong to those who work the hardest. It belongs to those who work strategically. Chapter 1. The Hustle Hangover. Why We're Burned Out. Hustle culture didn't start as a trap. It started as a promise. Work hard now, so you can relax later. Sacrifice today, so tomorrow is free. Grind early, so life eventually opens up. For a while, that promise felt believable. Long hours were worn like badges of honor. Exhaustion became proof of ambition. Being busy meant being important. And saying, "I'm swamped," quietly signaled status in a world addicted to productivity theater. But somewhere along the way, the equation broke. Today, more people are working harder than ever and feeling less fulfilled than ever. Calendars are full, inboxes never empty, notifications constant. Yet the results don't scale with the effort. Instead of freedom, there's fatigue. Instead of clarity, there's noise. Instead of momentum, there's burnout disguised as discipline. This is the hustle hangover, the delayed cost of years spent believing that more effort automatically equals more success. The glamour of busyness. Modern society rewards visibility, not impact. If you look busy, you must be productive. If you respond instantly, you must be committed. If your schedule is packed, you must be in demand. But busyness is often just unfiltered demand. Other people's priorities bleeding into your life. Meetings that don't matter. Tasks that create the illusion of progress without producing meaningful results. Endless motion without direction. The problem isn't that people aren't working hard enough. The problem is they're working without leverage. Busyness feels safe because it's familiar. It gives the brain small dopamine hits, checking boxes, replying to emails, clearing notifications. These micro-rewards trick us into feeling accomplished, even when nothing important has moved forward. Impactful work, on the other hand, is uncomfortable. It requires focus, isolation, and saying no, all things hustle culture quietly discourages. The burnout paradox. Here's the paradox no one talks about. Burnout isn't caused by working too much. It's caused by working too much on things that don't matter. People don't burn out from meaningful progress. They burn out from wasted energy, from effort without results, from constantly reacting instead of intentionally building. When effort and reward disconnect, the mind rebels. Motivation erodes. Focus fragments. Even rest stops working because exhaustion becomes psychological, not physical. This is why vacations no longer refresh people. They return just as tired because they're returning to the same broken system. The illusion of productivity. Hustle culture confuses activity with achievement. Answering emails feels productive. Attending meetings feels productive. Multitasking feels productive, but none of these guarantee results. True productivity is not about how much you do. It's about what changes because you acted. Did revenue increase? Did clarity improve? Did something move closer to completion? Did leverage compound? If the answer is no, then the effort, no matter how intense, was noise. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. Hustle culture survives because it's easier than thinking deeply. Thinking requires slowing down. Slowing down requires courage. And courage threatens the identity of someone who's been praised their whole life for working hard. Why this matters in 2026. The future rewards precision, not volume. Automation, AI, and leverage tools are removing the advantage of brute force. Working longer hours no longer guarantees an edge. In fact, it often makes people less competitive, slower, foggier, and emotionally depleted. The people who thrive now aren't doing more. They're doing less better. They understand that attention is finite. Energy is finite. Time is non-renewable. And wasting these on low-impact effort is the real failure. This chapter is not about shaming effort. It's about redirecting it. Because once you see the hustle hangover for what it is, a system that profits from your exhaustion, you're finally ready to step into a smarter way of operating. And that's exactly what we begin building in the next chapter. Chapter 2, Deconstructing the Anti-Hustle Mindset. Why doing less is a strategic advantage. At first glance, the phrase anti-hustle sounds dangerous, almost irresponsible. For years, we've been conditioned to associate effort with virtue. The harder you work, the more deserving you are. The longer your hours, the more serious your ambition. To suggest doing less feels like betrayal, not just of productivity culture, but of identity itself. But anti-hustle is not about withdrawal. It's about precision. It's the difference between swinging wildly and striking deliberately, between burning energy and converting it into outcomes, between motion and momentum, strategic inaction versus laziness. The first misconception to dismantle is this: anti-hustle is not laziness. Laziness avoids responsibility. Strategic inaction chooses responsibility. Anti-hustle means recognizing that not every opportunity deserves attention. Not every request deserves a response. Not every task deserves execution. The most effective people are not those who say yes the fastest. They're the ones who say no with clarity and confidence. Strategic inaction is an act of discipline. It requires the ability to tolerate short-term discomfort for long-term gain. Saying no often feels risky. It can trigger fear of missing out, fear of judgment, or fear of falling behind. But saying yes to everything is the riskiest move of all, because it guarantees dilution. Why more hours rarely equal more output? Human performance does not scale linearly. After a certain point, additional hours don't increase output, they degrade it. Cognitive fatigue sets in. Decision quality drops. Creativity collapses. Errors multiply. What looks like dedication is often just diminishing returns. The anti-hustle mindset understands a critical truth. Energy management beats time management. A focused 90-minute block of high-leverage work can outperform an entire day of fragmented effort. Yet most people spread their best energy thin across low-impact tasks because it feels safer than committing deeply to one thing. Deep work is confrontational. It forces clarity. It exposes weak ideas. And it leaves nowhere to hide. The myth of constant motion. Hustle culture worships momentum, but misunderstands it. True momentum comes from alignment, when effort flows in the same direction repeatedly. False momentum comes from activity, movement without purpose. Being busy feels productive because it removes the pressure to choose. Choice is uncomfortable. Choice means deciding what matters most and accepting that everything else matters less. Anti-hustle replaces constant motion with intentional stillness, not as an escape, but as a vantage point. Stillness creates perspective. Perspective creates leverage. Rest as a performance tool. One of the most radical ideas in anti-hustle philosophy is this. Rest is not recovery from work, it's preparation for it. Breakthroughs rarely happen when the mind is exhausted. They happen when the mind has space. History is full of insights born during walks, rest, boredom, and reflection, moments hustle culture dismisses as unproductive. Deliberate rest sharpens intuition. It allows patterns to surface. It restores emotional regulation. And most importantly, it prevents reactive decision-making driven by fatigue rather than strategy. The anti-hustle mindset treats rest as non-negotiable infrastructure, not a reward for burnout. Redefining discipline. Hustle culture defines discipline as endurance. Anti-hustle defines discipline as selectivity. It takes discipline to stop working when work is no longer effective. It takes discipline to protect focus in a world designed to fracture it. It takes discipline to trust that fewer, better actions will outperform constant effort. The strongest discipline isn't pushing harder, it's pulling back at the right time. Why this mindset wins long-term. Burnout is not just exhaustion, it's erosion of belief. When people burn out, they don't just lose energy. They lose confidence in the path they're on. Anti-hustle restores trust in yourself, your decisions, and your direction. By doing less, you gain clearer priorities, higher quality output, greater emotional stability, sustainable momentum. This mindset doesn't reject ambition. It refines it, because the future doesn't belong to the busiest. It belongs to the most focused. And once you understand that focus is power, the next step becomes inevitable. Learning how to choose what actually deserves your effort. That's where we go next. Chapter 3. The Art of Ruthless Prioritization. Turning clarity into leverage. Most people don't struggle because they lack ambition. They struggle because their ambition is scattered. Ruthless prioritization is not about doing less for the sake of doing less. It's about making hard decisions so your effort actually compounds instead of cancels itself out. Without prioritization, even the most motivated person becomes trapped in reaction mode, responding to noise instead of building signal. This chapter is about reclaiming control over where your energy goes, because energy placed incorrectly doesn't just underperform, it actively sabotages progress. Why everything feels important, and almost nothing is. The modern world is engineered to flatten priorities. Emails arrive with urgency. Meetings come labeled as critical. Notifications demand instant response. When everything is framed as important, your brain defaults to the safest behavior, responding to whatever is loudest. But urgency is not importance. Urgent tasks are often other people's priorities wearing a mask. Important tasks are usually quiet, uncomfortable, and easy to postpone because they don't scream for attention. Ruthless prioritization begins with accepting a harsh truth. Most of what fills your day does not deserve your best energy. And that's not a moral failure. It's a structural one. The 80-20 reality of impact. A small percentage of actions drive the majority of outcomes. This principle shows up everywhere: revenue, learning, relationships, health, and creative output. Yet most people distribute effort evenly across everything, guaranteeing mediocrity everywhere. Ruthless prioritization asks one dangerous question. If you could only make progress in one area this month, which one would matter most? That question is uncomfortable because it forces sacrifice. Progress in one direction requires stagnation elsewhere, at least temporarily. But that trade-off is where leverage is born. The stop doing list. Most productivity systems focus on what to add. Anti-hustle focuses on what to remove. A stop doing list is more powerful than a to-do list because it creates space, and space is where clarity lives. This means eliminating meetings without decisions, tasks without measurable outcomes, habits that consume energy without return, commitments made out of guilt, not intention. Every yes carries a hidden cost. Ruthless prioritization means accounting for that cost before you pay it. Decision fatigue and the cost of choice. Every decision consumes cognitive energy. When your day is filled with small, meaningless choices, your ability to make high-quality decisions erodes. This is why prioritization isn't just about time. It's about preserving mental bandwidth. The most effective people simplify aggressively. Fewer decisions, clear defaults, structured routines. Not because they lack creativity, but because they want their creativity reserved for work that matters. Choosing one metric that matters. Ruthless prioritization demands a singular question. What does success look like right now? Not long-term, not someday. Right now. When success is vague, effort scatters. When success is defined, effort aligns. This doesn't mean ignoring everything else forever. It means sequencing growth instead of attempting it all at once, which almost always leads to exhaustion and abandonment. The emotional cost of prioritization. Here's the part no one prepares you for. Ruthless prioritization triggers emotional discomfort. You will feel fear of missing out, guilt for disappointing others, anxiety about saying no, doubt about your decisions. These feelings don't mean you're doing it wrong. They mean you're breaking out of a reactive identity. Growth always requires tolerating discomfort long enough for clarity to catch up. Why clarity is a competitive advantage. In a world drowning in options, clarity is rare and therefore powerful. When you know what matters, decisions become faster, effort becomes cleaner, stress decreases, progress accelerates. Ruthless prioritization doesn't make life smaller. It makes it sharper. And once your priorities are clear, the next challenge emerges, protecting them in a world that constantly tries to steal your attention. That's exactly where we go next. Chapter 4. Strategic Simplification and Deliberate Rest. Multiplying output by removing friction. Most people think exhaustion is the price of ambition. It isn't. Exhaustion is usually the result of complexity. Too many inputs, too many decisions, too many unfinished loops draining mental energy. Strategic simplification is about removing that friction so effort flows instead of colliding. This chapter reframes rest and simplicity not as luxuries, but as performance multipliers. Why complexity is the silent performance killer. Complexity hides inside busy, multiple projects running simultaneously. Too many tools, too many open tabs, literal and mental. Each unfinished task creates cognitive drag. Even when you're not actively working on something, part of your mind stays tethered to it. This is why people feel tired before they even begin the day. Simplification starts with subtraction. Fewer active goals, fewer communication channels, fewer commitments competing for attention. Less complexity means fewer mental leaks. Batching and the cost of context switching. Switching tasks feels harmless. It isn't. Every time you shift focus, your brain pays a tax. Time to reorient, rebuild context, and regain depth. Multiply that by dozens of interruptions per day, and deep work becomes impossible. Strategic simplification groups similar tasks together. Communication in one window. Creative work in protected blocks. Administrative work in short, contained sessions. This isn't rigid scheduling. It's attention protection. Deep work as a scarce asset. Focus is no longer normal. That makes it valuable. Deep work requires two conditions. Time without interruption. Energy without depletion. Hustle culture destroys both. Anti-hustle restores them by treating focus as something to defend, not something to squeeze in between distractions. A single uninterrupted block can outperform an entire scattered day. Not because you worked longer, but because you worked cleaner. Redefining rest. Most people use rest to recover from damage. Anti-hustle uses rest to prevent it. Deliberate rest is structured, intentional, and protective. It includes sleep without guilt, breaks without stimulation overload, time away from inputs, not just work. True rest restores clarity, not just energy. Scrolling isn't rest. Numbing isn't rest. Avoidance isn't rest. Rest is absence of demand. Why stillness creates insight. When stimulation drops, insight rises. Many breakthroughs don't arrive through effort. They arrive through space. Space allows patterns to connect. It allows intuition to surface. It allows the mind to integrate what it already knows. Strategic stillness isn't passive. It's incubation, designing for recovery. You don't rise to discipline. You fall to design. Your environment should make rest inevitable. Devices out of the bedroom. Clear shutdown rituals. Boundaries around availability. Recovery doesn't happen accidentally. It happens when it's designed into your life. The compounding effect of rested effort. A rested mind sees leverage, makes cleaner decisions, maintains emotional regulation, produces higher quality work. This compounds. One clear decision leads to another. Momentum builds without burnout. Strategic simplification clears the path. Deliberate rest fuels the engine. Together, they transform effort into results. But there's one final layer, the outcome of all this discipline, focus, and restraint. What does anti-hustle actually produce in the real world? That's where we go next. Chapter 5, Unlocking Superior Outcomes, the Anti-Hustle Advantage. By now, the pattern should be clear. Anti-hustle is not about slowing down your ambition. It's about amplifying the results of your effort. When you remove noise, protect focus, simplify decisions, and rest deliberately, something unexpected happens. Outcomes improve, not gradually but disproportionately. This chapter is about understanding why that happens and how the anti-hustle approach quietly creates advantages that hustle culture can't replicate. Why less effort can produce more results. Most systems fail because they rely on willpower. Willpower is inconsistent. It fluctuates with energy, mood, stress, and environment. Anti-hustle systems rely on design, not motivation. When your environment, priorities, and schedule are aligned, progress becomes inevitable rather than heroic. You stop forcing results and start allowing them to emerge naturally through consistency and leverage. This is why anti-hustle scales and hustle burns out. Impact over intensity. Hustle culture worships intensity. Long hours, late nights, endless grind. Anti-hustle worships impact. Impact asks different questions. Did this move the needle? Did this create leverage? Did this eliminate future work? A single strategic decision can outperform months of frantic execution. A well-designed process can save years of effort. Intensity feels impressive. Impact changes reality. Clarity creates speed. There's a paradox most people miss. Slowing down increases speed. When priorities are clear, decisions happen faster. Execution becomes cleaner. Errors decrease. Rework disappears. Hustle culture rushes forward blindly. Anti-hustle pauses just long enough to aim, and then moves decisively. Speed without direction creates chaos. Direction with restraint creates momentum. The emotional advantage. Anti-hustle doesn't just change output. It changes how you feel while producing it. Burnout erodes confidence. Chronic stress narrows thinking. Emotional fatigue leads to reactive decisions and impulsive behavior. When energy is protected, confidence stabilizes. Emotional control improves. Creativity expands. Stress loses its grip. Calm becomes a strategic asset. In high-pressure environments, The person who remains composed almost always outperforms the one who panics, no matter how hard they work. Measuring success differently. Hustle measures success by hours worked. Anti-hustle measures success by outcomes created. This shift rewires identity. You stop asking, "How busy was I today?" and start asking, "What did I move forward?" This simple reframing removes guilt, reduces anxiety, and reinforces intentional effort. The compounding effect of sustainable progress. The true power of anti-hustle reveals itself over time. Because effort is sustainable. You don't quit prematurely. You don't sabotage yourself through exhaustion. You maintain consistency when others burn out. Consistency beats intensity every time. Small, high-quality actions repeated daily build advantages that are nearly impossible to compete with. Freedom as the final metric. Anti-hustle ultimately produces freedom, not idleness, but control. Control over your time, your energy, your attention, your direction. This is the outcome hustle culture promises but rarely delivers. The irony is simple. The people who do the least unnecessary work often achieve the most meaningful success. They aren't lazy. They're precise. And that precision is what allows them to build lives and results that don't require recovery from. Chapter 6. Implementing the anti-hustle system. Turning philosophy into daily practice. Understanding the anti-hustle mindset is powerful. Living it is transformative. This chapter is where theory becomes execution, where clarity turns into structure and intention becomes routine. Because insight without implementation is just intellectual entertainment. The real advantage comes from building systems that make anti-hustle automatic, even on days when discipline is low and pressure is high. From motivation to systems. Most people rely on motivation to change behavior. That's a fragile strategy. Motivation fluctuates. Systems endure. The anti-hustle system is built on one principle. Design your days so the right actions happen by default. Instead of asking, "Do I feel like doing the important work today?" you ask, "Have I designed my environment so the important work is unavoidable?" This removes ego from the equation. You stop negotiating with yourself and start operating from structure. The daily anti-hustle framework. At its core, the anti-hustle day has 3 non-negotiable elements. 1 high-leverage priority. Protected focus time. Intentional shutdown. Everything else is secondary. The mistake most people make is trying to balance everything equally. Anti-hustle rejects balance in favor of sequencing. Some things get full attention today, so others can wait without guilt. Designating the one thing. Each day must answer one question clearly. If only one thing moves forward today, what should it be? This isn't about urgency. It's about impact. That one thing should move a meaningful goal forward, reduce future effort, create clarity or leverage. Once identified, the rest of the day organizes itself around protecting that task. Time blocking without rigidity. Anti-hustle uses time blocks as containers, not cages. You don't micromanage every minute. You protect windows of focus and recovery. A simple structure might look like deep work block, communication block, admin block, rest and recovery. This reduces decision fatigue and prevents the day from being hijacked by distractions. Protecting focus in a distracted world. Focus doesn't survive by accident. Anti-hustle practitioners treat focus like capital. Notifications are silenced. Interruptions are minimized. Availability is limited. This isn't selfish, it's strategic. The quality of your output depends on the quality of your attention. When focus is protected, work becomes cleaner. Fewer mistakes, less rework, faster completion. The power of intentional endings. Most people end their day exhausted, not complete. Anti-hustle introduces the concept of a daily shutdown ritual, a clear signal that work is done and recovery can begin. This might include reviewing what moved forward, noting what can wait, closing open loops for tomorrow. This allows the mind to rest fully rather than carrying unfinished business into the night. Weekly simplification reviews. Anti-hustle is not static. It adapts. Once a week, step back and ask, what created the most impact? What drained energy without return? What could be removed or simplified? Progress accelerates when friction is continuously removed. The identity shift. Here's the deeper layer of implementation. Identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who works hard. You start seeing yourself as someone who works effectively. This identity shift matters because behavior follows belief. When you believe your value comes from impact rather than effort, you stop overworking to prove yourself. Handling resistance and doubt. At first, anti-hustle feels uncomfortable. You may feel less busy, less visibly productive, slightly uneasy. That discomfort is withdrawal from hustle addiction. Trust the process. Results often lag behind clarity, but when they arrive with force. Why this system sustains long-term. Anti-hustle works because it respects human limits. It aligns with cognitive capacity, emotional regulation, energy cycles. Instead of fighting human nature, it leverages it. And over time, the compounding effect becomes undeniable. Cleaner days, stronger results, more freedom. This is not a temporary tactic. It's an operating system. Chapter 7, Anti-Hustle as a Lifestyle, Sustaining Success Without Burnout. At this point, anti-hustle is no longer just a productivity method. It becomes a way of living. This chapter is about permanence, how to embed the anti-hustle philosophy into your identity, routines, relationships, and long-term goals so success no longer comes at the cost of your health, clarity, or peace. Because the real victory isn't achieving more once. It's achieving consistently without breaking yourself. From short-term wins to long-term alignment. Most productivity systems collapse because they're built for sprints, not marathons. Anti-hustle is different. It assumes you want sustained creativity, long-term relevance, stable energy, compounding growth. This requires alignment between ambition and capacity. When your lifestyle supports your goals, progress feels natural instead of forced. Redefining success beyond output. Anti-hustle changes how you measure success. Instead of asking, how much did I do? How busy was I? You ask, how aligned was I? Did my actions reflect my priorities? Did I protect my energy? Success becomes something you experience daily, not something postponed to the future. Boundaries as a form of self-respect. Hustle culture glorifies accessibility. Anti-hustle protects boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They're filters. They determine who gets your time, when you are available, what deserves your attention. Saying no becomes easier when you understand that every yes trades away future energy. Boundaries are not about control. They're about sustainability. Relationships without exhaustion. Anti-hustle improves relationships because it removes resentment. When you're not overextended, you listen better. You respond thoughtfully. You show up fully. Presence replaces performance. People don't need your constant availability. They need your genuine attention. Managing ambition without anxiety. Ambition doesn't disappear in anti-hustle. It matures. Instead of chasing everything, you pursue what matters deeply. This reduces anxiety because your goals stop competing with each other. Direction replaces pressure. Focus replaces overwhelm. You stop living in reaction mode and start living by design. Resilience through recovery. Life will still throw stress, uncertainty, and setbacks. Anti-hustle doesn't eliminate difficulty. It builds resilience. When rest is built into your life, stress doesn't accumulate uncontrollably. Setbacks don't derail you. Recovery becomes faster. You don't need to escape your life to recover from it. Growth without self-betrayal. One of the quiet tragedies of hustle culture is how often people betray themselves chasing success. Anti-hustle restores integrity between who you are and how you live. Your work stops consuming your identity. Your ambition stops erasing your humanity. And paradoxically, this makes your work better. The calm advantage. In a chaotic world, calm is rare. Calm allows clear thinking, emotional regulation, strategic decisions. People trust calm leaders. They follow clarity. They respect restraint. Anti-hustle turns calm into a competitive advantage. Living the playbook. At this stage, anti-hustle no longer feels rebellious. It feels obvious. You see how much effort was wasted before, how much energy is now protected, how much momentum comes from clarity. This isn't about doing less for comfort. It's about doing what matters consistently. And that's how success stops being exhausting. Chapter 8. Decision Minimalism. How elite performers eliminate mental noise. Most people think their biggest problem is time. It isn't. The real problem is decision overload. Every day, you make thousands of micro decisions. What to respond to, what to ignore, what to work on, what to postpone, what to eat, when to rest, when to push. Each decision pulls from the same finite mental reservoir. By the time something truly important appears, the mind is already depleted. Anti-hustle recognizes this hidden drain and attacks it at the root. Why decision fatigue destroys momentum? Decision fatigue doesn't announce itself loudly. It creeps in quietly. You procrastinate on important tasks. You choose convenience over alignment. You avoid decisions entirely and default to distraction. This isn't laziness. It's cognitive exhaustion. When your brain is overloaded, it seeks relief, not progress. And relief usually looks like scrolling, snacking, reacting, or postponing. Decision minimalism restores momentum by reducing the number of decisions required to live well and work effectively. Designing defaults that work for you. The most effective people don't make better decisions in the moment. They make better decisions in advance. They design defaults. Defaults decide when you work, when you rest, what you focus on, what you ignore. Instead of asking, "What should I do now?" the system answers for you. This removes friction and preserves mental energy for work that actually requires thinking. Routine as a freedom tool. Routine has a bad reputation because it's confused with rigidity. In reality, routine creates freedom. When the basics are automated, your mornings are calmer, your focus is sharper, your emotions are steadier. Routine handles the predictable so your mind can handle the meaningful. This is why anti-hustle embraces simple, repeatable structures, not to limit life, but to protect mental clarity. Reducing choices to increase quality. More options don't improve decisions, they delay them. Decision minimalism means fewer tools, fewer platforms, fewer commitments, fewer priorities. Every reduction sharpens focus. When choices are limited, execution improves. When execution improves, confidence grows. When confidence grows, momentum becomes self-sustaining. The hidden cost of open loops. Unfinished decisions linger. Every unresolved choice creates a mental loop that quietly drains attention. Even if you're not thinking about it consciously, your brain keeps track and pays the cost. Decision minimalism closes loops aggressively. Decide and act. Decide and schedule. Decide and discard. Indecision is more exhausting than action. The anti-hustle decision filter. Before committing to anything, anti-hustle asks, does this align with my priorities? Does this create leverage or noise? Does this cost energy I can't afford to lose? If the answer isn't clear, the default is no. This filter protects future you from present pressure. Why fewer decisions create emotional stability? Emotional instability often comes from overload. When the mind is constantly choosing, evaluating, and reacting, emotions fluctuate wildly. Stress increases. Anxiety spikes. Focus collapses. Simplification restores emotional regulation. Calm isn't a personality trait. It's a structural outcome. The silent power of mental space. When decision noise fades, something remarkable happens. You think more clearly. You anticipate better. You see connections others miss. This mental space becomes a strategic advantage, especially in environments where everyone else is overwhelmed. Anti-hustle doesn't just save energy. It creates insight, living with fewer, better decisions. Decision minimalism doesn't make life boring. It makes it intentional. You stop reacting and start choosing deliberately, calmly, confidently. And when decisions become lighter, execution becomes stronger. This is how anti-hustle quietly outperforms chaos. Chapter 9. Resilience without panic. Thriving in uncertainty with the anti-hustle mindset. The future doesn't reward certainty. It rewards adaptability. Most people are not unprepared for change because they lack intelligence or skill. They're unprepared because their lives are already operating at maximum strain. When pressure hits, there's no buffer left, no energy, no clarity, no emotional margin. Anti-hustle builds something hustle culture never does: resilience without panic. This chapter explores how strategic restraint, energy protection, and clarity allow you to stay steady when everything around you accelerates, collapses, or changes direction. Why hustle breaks under pressure? Hustle thrives in predictable environments. Uncertainty exposes its weakness. When success is built on constant output, any disruption feels catastrophic. Rest feels impossible. Fear drives decision-making. Burnout turns small problems into existential threats. Anti-hustle, by contrast, assumes uncertainty. It prepares for it, structurally and psychologically. The power of slack. In engineering, slack is intentional excess capacity. Without it, systems snap under stress. Human systems are no different. Anti-hustle builds slack into life. White space in schedules. Energy reserves. Financial buffers. Emotional margin. Slack isn't waste. It's survival infrastructure. When disruption arrives, slack becomes your advantage. Emotional regulation as strategy. In moments of uncertainty, emotions spike first. Fear narrows thinking. Anxiety accelerates impulsive action. Stress pulls attention inward. Anti-hustle trains emotional regulation through rested nervous systems, simplified decision-making, clear priorities. Calm is not accidental, it's practiced. The person who can pause before reacting sees options others miss. Anti-hustle and adaptability. Adaptability requires clarity. When you're overcommit, you can't pivot, you can't experiment, you can't absorb failure. Anti-hustle frees bandwidth for adjustment. You're not clinging to outdated plans because you're not defined by frantic execution. You adjust without identity collapse, failing without falling apart. Failure feels catastrophic only when effort is unsustainable. When your system is balanced, failure becomes data. Setbacks become temporary. Confidence remains intact. Anti-hustle removes ego from output. You're no longer proving worth through exhaustion. This makes learning faster and recovery quicker. Long-term thinking in short-term chaos. Uncertainty pressures people into short-term thinking. Anti-hustle resists that pull. By protecting energy and clarity, you maintain the ability to think in horizons, not headlines. You don't abandon long-term strategy for short-term relief. This alone creates separation, building psychological durability. Durability isn't toughness, it's recoverability. Anti-hustle creates durability by preventing chronic stress, encouraging reflection, supporting emotional processing. You don't harden yourself against life. You strengthen your ability to respond. Why calm outlasts chaos? Chaos burns bright, but fast. Calm compounds. People who remain steady make fewer mistakes, earn trust, see patterns, act with precision. Anti-hustle doesn't avoid intensity. It deploys it selectively. The quiet confidence of preparedness. Preparedness doesn't feel dramatic. It feels calm. When you know your energy is protected, your priorities are clear, your system is flexible. You don't panic at change. You adjust. And in a world addicted to urgency, that composure becomes rare and powerful. Chapter 10. The Quiet Edge, Building a Life That Doesn't Need Recovery. Most people think the goal is success. It isn't. The real goal is building a life that can sustain success without breaking you. This final chapter is not about tactics or techniques. It's about integration, taking everything you've learned and turning it into a way of operating that doesn't depend on willpower, urgency, or exhaustion. Because the ultimate advantage isn't how hard you can push. It's how long you can stay clear, focused, and effective. Why most systems eventually fail. Productivity systems fail for one simple reason. They demand more than humans can give. They assume endless energy. They assume constant motivation. They assume life won't interrupt. Anti-hustle works because it respects reality. It doesn't ask you to become superhuman. It asks you to become strategic. The difference between power and pressure. Pressure forces action. Power allows choice. Hustle culture runs on pressure, deadlines, urgency, fear of falling behind. Anti-hustle builds power through clarity, restraint, and alignment. When you have power, you choose when to act. You choose what matters. You choose what to ignore. Pressure makes you reactive. Power makes you deliberate. The compounding advantage of calm consistency. Small, high-quality actions repeated over time outperform bursts of intensity. This is where anti-hustle becomes unstoppable. Because while others burn hot and fade, you remain consistent, clear, emotionally regulated. Momentum stops feeling forced. Progress becomes predictable. Identity, from doer to designer. The deepest shift happens at the identity level. You stop seeing yourself as someone who executes endlessly. You start seeing yourself as someone who designs systems that execute for you. This is the quiet edge. Design replaces discipline. Structure replaces stress. Alignment replaces effort. Living with intentional restraint. Anti-hustle doesn't eliminate ambition. It channels it. Restraint becomes strength. Saying no becomes clarity. Stillness becomes leverage. You no longer chase everything. You choose what deserves you. Freedom without escape. Most people dream of escape. Vacations, weekends, retirement. Anti-hustle creates freedom inside the present. Your life doesn't require recovery because it isn't built on depletion. Work fits into life instead of consuming it. The long view. Years from now, the difference will be obvious. Not in how busy you were, not in how exhausted you looked, but in what you built, what you sustained, how you lived. Anti-hustle leaves a longer trail. The final truth. Here it is, the truth beneath everything you've heard. More effort does not guarantee better outcomes. Better strategy does. When you do less, intentionally, you create space for what actually matters. And that space becomes your greatest advantage. This is not the end of hustle. It's the beginning of control.